Hello, we are live. The Rotoworld Player News Q&A. Eric Samulski, James Schiano here to talk baseball with you on this Monday afternoon where we got some surprise day games. James, we didn't fully know that we were going to be locked and loaded with more day games than we had on opening day. Yeah. But that is the case today. We've got a bunch of games starting up just within the next 10 minutes or so. We can chat about those while we are streaming. But yeah, what just first opening weekend of baseball? How did that go for you? What were your reactions to it, both as a Mets fan and just as a fan in general?
I mean, just jubilation that it's back. The fact that now we get that nightly box score scroll is the most beautiful thing ever on earth to go through. Baseball Savant, check stolen bases elsewhere. Just get find the data. It's also just the most fun time for fantasy baseball because we learned so much in these first few games that we might have known before, we might have not even been thinking about before, but now it just comes all so in our faces that it's really this first weekend. It's the best. It's the best baseball weekend of the year. One of the best this whole season.
Yes, we are going to talk about some of the stuff we learned. We are also going to encourage you not to overreact. I've had questions about whether in the waiver wire chat I was doing on Twitter, but also on Reddit when I posted the article, which I do every Sunday on NBC Sports, my waiver wire article. You have a midweek waiver article. Is that Tuesdays?
Yeah, Tuesdays coming out tomorrow. Yes. It'll be a little more in depth.
Yeah, so James's article Tuesdays you can use if you have any midweek waiver ads, periods in your league. My article comes out Sundays. I had people being like, "Should I drop Tristan Casas for Jonathan Aranda?" It's like, no, don't. I know some guys are struggling. It's been 3 or 4 games. Let's not overreact to players that you genuinely like or believed in prior to the season. You do have to react, sadly, to things like injuries. We're going to kick this thing off with Cowchad asks, is the Josh Lowe replacement gig Meisner's to lose? Or does this just speed up the Chandler Simpson clock? I'm a big fan of Meisner's all-around profile, but don't want to invest if he won't stick. So first of all, what we do know about the Josh Lowe oblique injury is that they have said that it's more severe than the oblique injury he suffered last year. The oblique injury he suffered last year kept him out for multiple months. So I think we have to assume this is a multiple-month injury for Josh Lowe, which is a total bummer. If you have IL spots in your league, you're just throwing him on the IL spot and waiting. But this is a situation where if you get a bunch more injuries this week, like you may have to cut Josh Lowe in a lot of formats because I think you're waiting at least 2 months before he comes back. NFBC formats with no waiver wire, you're moving on. Other leagues, you're throwing him on the IL and crossing your fingers that you don't get a lot of other injuries. But this is a bummer. Cameron Meisner does appear to be the immediate replacement for Josh Lowe. I wrote about him a little bit in the waiver wire column. Meisner was a prospect for the Miami Marlins. He was a first-round pick, too, for them back in 2019. He never really put it all together, but the power-speed combination is there. So 21 homers, 21 steals in AAA for Tampa Bay in 2023. That was in 130 games. 17 homers, 30 steals in AAA for Tampa Bay last year. That was in 113 games. The issue is 226 batting average in 2023, 248 batting average in 2024 in AAA. Like 30% strikeout rates. The walk rate is good, but he does strike out, and you tend to not see guys get to the big leagues and strike out less than they struck out in the minor leagues. This is a guy who was posting 14, 15% swinging strike rates in AAA. He's going to swing and miss 16, 17% of the time. The batting average is always going to be low. But if you're in super deep leagues, there is some power speed there I could see going with. I don't think this speeds up Simpson's timeline in the sense that like his call-up is imminent. I think it makes it more likely that Meisner gets like 3 weeks to a month to see what he could do. But the Chandler Simpson is going to play center field, and Johnny DeLuca is there right now. And so I think DeLuca and DeLuca's success is going to be more connected to Chandler Simpson than Josh Lowe is my take.
Yeah, and it's also just that same frustrating thing the Rays and a lot of other teams who spend similar amounts of money to the Rays do is that they will let that prospect get ready as long as they possibly need before starting that service time clock. And we saw it a little bit this weekend where the move for Lowe was for Jake Mangum, who's a former Mets farmhand. I think was cut by the Marlins afterwards. He was a former decent college player at Mississippi State, but he's in the lineup, not only in the line, but batting second as one of
Mhm.
now only 3 healthy outfielders on the Rays' entire 40-man roster, along with the rest of that starting outfield, John DeLuca and Jake Mangum. I think this means we'll see a lot more Christopher Morel in the outfield, which I think we're probably going to see anyway, but this just certainly locks that in entirely now. There sadly isn't really a very good corresponding move here for fantasy to make do without Josh Lowe. And I do agree with you that in most leagues, even with IL spots, you're going to probably have some more valuable players on the IL, probably better timelines. Like he's not someone that when he comes back, he's a part-time player anyway, who's only been inconsistent in his past. Like he's a really difficult player to hold at this point, and there's no real obvious move that the Rays have made that gives someone else imminent fantasy value. Sadly,
Yeah, listen, I really do like Josh Lowe, and I'm happy to have him in most leagues because I do think the power speed combination is there, and obviously, even if he's a part-time guy, he's a part-time guy on the strong side of a platoon, and so that can be that's obviously more valuable than
definitely.
in another sense. But it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I think you're going to have to move on. And we could talk about another injury right now that nobody's asked about in the chat, but we just got news that Colton Cowser is going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks with a fractured thumb. And so the Colton Cowser situation here theoretically opens up playing time for Heston Kjerstad. We have seen the Orioles do this before, though. Kjerstad hit just 2 in spring training, struck out 12 times, 16 times, I think, to 8 walks. The Orioles claim they want to give him everyday at-bats. Dylan Carlson hit well in spring training. He was hitting well in AAA. He's a veteran. There's a chance that Dylan Carlson, swoops in there and gets more playing time. I should note Heston Kjerstad is starting today against the Red Sox and against a lefty.
Yes.
However, just keep in mind, Dylan Carlson played a AAA game last night, and this is a 12:30 first pitch, and he got called up to the Orioles at the move was official at 10:30 today. So there's also a good chance Dylan Carlson was not. They didn't want to put Dylan Carlson in the starting lineup because he couldn't actually get to the field today in enough time to go through the proper warm up for the game. So I just want to I would be picking up Heston Kjerstad, and I'm curious if you would as well. But I just want people to know that don't say locked in Heston Kjerstad as a starter because he's starting today. You could very well see Dylan Carlson in the starting lineup tomorrow now that he's going to be back in Baltimore.
Especially, and I think the most meaningful thing about that Heston Kjerstad start today is he's not starting in the outfield. He's starting a designated hitter. Ramon Laureano is drawn to start in right field, Cedric Mullins in center, and Tyler O'Neill again in left. So I think that's also very telling about how much the Orioles trust Heston Kjerstad playing in the field, because they know we know they barely trust him at all. And the fact that now, even a situation where they seem forced to put him in the lineup, he's still just a designated hitter. That tells me that he's still not going to be a full-time player. Again, maybe it's just as a lefty. I don't make it. You get Laureano in the lineup against a left-handed pitcher, but they've done this too many times to Kjerstad, and I really think that we have to be taking what they're telling us a little bit more seriously, that they don't really trust him as an everyday player in this roster.
Yeah, it is. That's tough.
Yeah, it's annoying.
It is very annoying. It's very annoying. It is very tough. I still think I'm adding him, right? I'm adding Heston Kjerstad in most leagues because I think that there's an opportunity for Heston Kjerstad to take this and run with it, much like Colton Cowser did last year. We know that he has really good power. And so I'll take the gamble, but don't go. I mean, obviously, if you're in a weekly fab league, by the time Sunday rolls around, you're going to have a far better understanding of this. And even by Wednesday night, you might. But if you're in a first come, first serve league and he's available, I would try to add him if I could. I just wouldn't cut somebody who I liked during draft season, who I know is in an everyday job, because there's a chance, in my league, I have a shallow 12-team league where the outfielder I would cut is Lane Thomas. I'm not cutting a Lane Thomas for Heston Kjerstad, even if Lane Thomas is a fine but not great fantasy outfielder, because I know Lane Thomas is an everyday player and the speed is for real in terms of fantasy value. And I just would regret cutting him if in 2 days Dylan Carlson has started the next 2 games and I'm looking at Heston Kjerstad as just a bench bat again.
Here's a similar would you rather for someone that's playing sparingly but hitting well. Probably I don't know what the playing time's going to shake out as compared to Kjerstad. Trevor Larnach on the Twins had a good weekend. Out of the lineup today against the lefty. Would you rather have Larnach or Heston Kjerstad?
I was big on Larnach coming into the year, so I would probably keep Larnach. But I guess I understand that. Also, I think it depends on the league type, right? In a Yahoo league, Kjerstad is outfield eligible. Yeah. So I think that's an easier swap to make. If I was swapping in Kjerstad in a league where he's just util eligible and I would have to stick him in my utility spot only, if I was swapping in Kjerstad in a league where he was only UT eligible, I'd probably keep Larnach. How do you feel about that?
I think I would lean Larnach too. I've never been a huge Kjerstad fan. I know he hits the ball very hard, but it just never seemed to me to be a package that I play every day. Here's another strange would you rather. Would you rather Heston Kjerstad or Jordan Walker, who hit the ball really hard again, but still doesn't do a lot of the regular things well, but probably will still play more consistently than Larnach than Kjerstad will.
Yeah, I would keep Walker just because, again, like we're talking about Walker as like a former like top prospect who had some success in his first attempt, and I know it wasn't like a sustained success, but had some success in his first attempt. And, was going through swing changes in the off season and things like that. And so I would just keep a guy who I think is going to play every day rather than go with Heston Kjerstad here. I think Kjerstad is like a deeper league, or, I've got a Jonathan Aranda type on my bench where I know Aranda is a platoon guy anyway, and I don't really love it. So yeah. We got a couple questions here about Kyle Manzardo I want to get to.
Nice.
The first is just, is he for real? I think he's for real, but I'm curious, what do you think?
I think he's for real as well. I don't think there was ever much of a skills issue with Kyle Manzardo coming into the season. I think it was pretty trustworthy that he had power, made decent swing decisions. The minor league track record, the pedigree spoke for itself. The cool thing about Manzardo is that he came into the year seemingly very ready to jump on left-handed pitching. He has 2 home runs. I think he has 2 home runs in total, but I know 2 of his home runs came off left-handed pitchers this year. He smacked a nice opposite field triple on Cole Reagans, who might be one of the best left-handed pitchers in the league at this point. Yeah. And the Guardians have been willing to put him in the lineup and in prominent lineup positions against both righties and lefties. So all that together for me is just like he's going to be out there every single day, and I trust his production. I know Jose Ramirez was out on Sunday. That put Manzardo in the 3 spot in the order. I don't know if he stays at 3, but somewhere between 3, 4, and 5 looks like he's playing every day. And seeing that for Manzardo, and again, the fact that he hit a home run off Angel Zerpa that went like into the waterfall in Kansas City. Like he smoked it. He crushed the ball. And the fact that he's able to do that against left-handed pitching, which seemed like it would be the biggest hole that he could have this year, that to me is like a big blinking light. Like I'm in on Kyle Manzardo after that.
Yeah, listen, let's tout the work. I have an article on NBC Sports where I spoke to Kyle Manzardo at spring training. And just him, Stephen Vogt, they all just talked about the time it takes to adjust and the need to the time he took to when he went back to AAA after being demoted last year to like kind of recalibrate his approach and doing things the way that he was used to doing them, and that confidence that he could hit at this level. He's going to play pretty much every day. He's going to play against lefties. He's going to play against righties. My only caution to you is if you think he's picking up first base eligibility soon, I don't believe that's the case. Carlos Santana was signed because he is a very good defensive first baseman. He's going to play first base 90% of the time. There will be a random day where he gets the day off, and it might be Manzardo at first, but they also might just put like Gabriel Arias at first, or we don't really know how that's going to go. Daniel Schneemann. So Manzardo, I believe in. I don't know that he's going to pick up first base eligibility. And so that leads to questions like this, which is Tyler Soderstrom or Kyle Manzardo. Again, this is a rest of season question, but I do want to just say, as James and I said last week, like get the rest of season out of your head for right now. It's just who is going to be most impactful for me right now. If that player winds up, if Soderstrom is great for the next month and Manzardo struggles, and then Manzardo's great at the end, like, it doesn't matter. You're going to make these moves as the year goes on. Who would you prefer to add right now? So this league has OPS as a 6th offensive category. Does that sway you at all here?
Not very much. I like when leagues have OPS as a category. I play in a few OPS leagues myself because I think OPS is just like a great way to encapsulate how good a hitter is in terms of power, on base ability, everything. And truthfully, I think that Soderstrom's just a little bit better of a version of Manzardo right now. I do like both of them. I think Soderstrom is a little bit more advanced. I think Soderstrom makes slightly better swing decisions. He has more power. I'm looking right now at some pulled fly ball stuff. Manzardo pulls his fly balls at a much higher rate than Soderstrom. That's kind of the only thing that Soderstrom's really missing right now. And Soderstrom's another guy you were scared about platoon heading into the season. He's playing against lefties. He's hitting in the heart of the order. He took Logan Gilbert and Brian Wu deep over opening weekend, which is an incredibly impressive feat for a young hitter like Soderstrom. While I do like them both, and it was a good point by you about Manzardo only having UT eligibility in a lot of places and not being able to really probably pick up first base anytime soon. Soderstrom has first base. I think in Yahoo, Soderstrom might even be catcher eligible still. Is kind of that little cheat code kind of guy. Yeah. So I think that both good, in on both. I think Soderstrom's a better version of Manzardo, though, at this moment.
I would also just say, remember that I think OPS sometimes we focus a lot on the power part of it, and just acknowledging that, like, Kyle Manzardo is a guy who ran like 13% walk rates at AAA. His OPS last year, even when he was not good at the major league level, was 703. And that was because he's still walking a little bit. His AAA OPSs are like 940, 946. Like, so I think you're going to get more power with Soderstrom, even though I think Manzardo's probably like a 20 homer guy, and I think Soderstrom is maybe like a 25 plus homer guy. I think that Manzardo will walk a little bit more. I like the lineup in Cleveland a little bit more.
Really? How about I like the A's lineup a little bit more?
You think so?
A little bit more. Depth-wise.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I guess the injury to Zach Galoff is not like a huge one. I do like the top of the, actually, that's pretty true. I like the top of the lineup in Oakland, and the Guardians lineup. Yes, Sacramento. I apologize. The Guardians lineup, I guess it depends on what we get from Nolan Jones, Kwan, Jose Ramirez, Carlos Santana, Lane Thomas. I guess actually these are pretty equal lineups in terms of like a couple of guys at the top who really carry it. And then the bottom is like, maybe I could see it. This is kind of coin flippy for me, to be honest with you. And I think I get in an OPS league leaning Soderstrom, especially with the position eligibility the way it is.
I have a feeling I'm going to talk about, if not both of these guys, at least one of these guys, like very in depth on the waiver article tomorrow. Because I think these are the two.
You should.
First week of the season, these are the kind of things you see and you notice right away. They're like, oh, this could actually be something. And there's a real chance that one or both of these guys are legit 30 homer bats this year. And those are the kind of things you can add the first 5 days of the season that you will not be able to find after the first month or two. And that's why this is a very important decision early on in the season. I don't feel like there's a wrong way to go, but I feel like one might be more right by the time we get done with it.
Let me ask you, I got this question a lot on my waiver column. It was these two guys or Spencer Torkelson.
That's so
I'll add a third baseman in here. I personally put Torkelson as the third guy on this list. And I think a lot of people were confused about that. The thing for me is like, yes, I understand he hit 30 homers in 2023. Acknowledging he is a 222 career MLB hitter in 364 games. There's a very real chance that Torkelson will run the worst batting average of these three guys. I think for sure, hands down, worse batting average than Manzardo. The question is, do you think Soderstrom made gains that Torkelson maybe hasn't? Torkelson really struggled against fastballs up last year. He popped them up. He didn't get on top of them. And so I kind of need to see whether he's actually fixed that. And I know he had 3 strong games, but 3 strong games doesn't tell me you fixed an issue that was out on you, like pitchers were attacking you a particular way. Also remember that he didn't go down to AAA in and crush it last year. Like he had a 31% strikeout rate. He hit 240. I get that like he was a little bit better in spring training and that he looks good at the start of this year, but we're talking about super small sample sizes and also talking about a Tigers team where like if Parker Metters and Matt Vierling didn't get hurt, I don't think Torkelson is making this roster. So there is a yes, he's here and he's hitting, and if he keeps hitting, he's probably going to stay. But there's also an idea. There's also a situation where Meadows comes back, Wenceel Perez comes back, Matt Vierling comes back. Torkelson kind of goes back to being a 220, 230 hitter with decent power, and they just say, we can't keep you in the lineup again. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying, I think if I'm choosing between these three guys, I think there's a little more security in the other two, and I don't think there's that much more upside in Torkelson. Sadly,
that probably is the truth at this point, even as a 25-year-old former first overall pick. It feels like a guy like Torkelson, I'm seeing in the Mets right now with Brett Beatty as well. It seems to be this mental thing that's going on with some of these former top prospects that struggle, go back down, come back up, go back down, and kind of hit these roadblocks. Torkelson this weekend also, again, very, very small sample size, not a lot to glean from it, but the number one things we can see are per pitch and even per swing metrics a tiny bit. Not even, we don't want to take them too strongly, but he was swinging only 25, 30% of the time on the pitches he saw with his opening series. That's probably a little too selective for a guy like Torkelson. It doesn't feel like he has even close to the strongest role of all these guys, like you said as well. He probably is third for me as well, but also someone that speculatively, like if you have the spot, like we could play some would you rathers with Torkelson. I would want to get Torkelson on some rosters before, just in case something does happen. I had this option purely in a league too for a second utility spot I had open. A 12-team, like relatively deep league, but points based. And I did choose Soderstrom just specifically over Torkelson. Manzardo was already on a roster. But I did have that thought over last night, like putting in my claims where I was like, which one of these guys do I want to do? And I think Soderstrom has a left-handed hitter in a park that's going to be more friendly for bats. Also, again, in a lineup that's probably better than the Tigers lineup. That A's lineup is probably better than the one in Detroit. Like there just seems to be a lot more good there for Soderstrom, where Torkelson could have 2 bad weeks, lose the spot again. It could all be over.
Yeah, it's certainly tough. We'll go to a first base option in a much deeper format. But Brian Hack said Gavin Sheets more playing time going forward. The quick answer to that is yes. Gavin Sheets is the DH against right-handed pitching for the Padres to start the season. They just faced 2 lefties in their first series, and so I believe he got 1 start. Oh no, they had a 4-game stretch. He appeared, I will say, in 4 games. He was a pinch hitter in the first game and then got 3 starts. And so that's going to be the case. But it's also, I love that he didn't start the first game and he pinch hit as soon as a right-handed reliever came in, because that tells me that, like, yeah, if you're in those weekly lock leagues and he has that 1 start against a lefty, like you may still get 1 at bat in that game. Or if he has 2 starts against a lefty, you may still get 1 or 2 at bats in those games. Sheets had a really good spring. He's 28 years old. He's had some decent stretches with the White Sox before. I do like that he never really posts high strikeout rates. He's kind of a 21% strikeout rate guy. 6.4% barrel rate on the career is like, nothing to write home about, but he's not swinging a wet noodle up there.
No.
And he's going to be in a good lineup. And that's why I think this is a deeper league play. In some leagues, he's first base and outfield eligible, which is just nice as a bench bat. And he's going to be a 230, 240 hitter. Maybe he pops 15 homers in a full season, and he's not going to strike out a lot. He's going to make a decent amount of contact, and maybe you get some chip in RBIs. And if you're in deep formats, like that can be valuable.
Yeah, I picked up Sheets in a handful of deep leagues this week because if you look at Sheets and the kind of player he is, never been tremendously spectacular at anything. Lifts the ball, pulls it, enough power, like you said. The other options for the Padres at DH are Yuli Gurriel and Brandon Lockridge, or Jose Iglesias going to the field, and then one of their other guys going to one of the other infielders moving to DH. So there's not really a wealth of options for the bottom of the roster in San Diego. And Sheets, between Yuli Gurriel and Brandon Lockridge, is by far the highest upside offensive option they have internally. So he's going to play a lot. I think that's a sharp move in deeper leagues right now.
I agree. I have a soft spot for Gavin Sheets. I don't really know why. Cow Chad asks, Kyle Freeland's annual mirage looks to already be in full swing. Worth running him till the inevitable blow up, or just ignore the handful of great starts to avoid the grenade? I don't
I'll never. No,
roster Rockies starters.
never.
I just
Never,
don't do it. Maybe if I was in like a really deep NL only type of league and you were able to say like, okay, if he's on the road, I'll throw him in this week. And when he's at home, I put him on the bench. That's kind of the only format for me where I could see rostering a Rockies starter, especially a Rockies starter where like, I think Kyle Freeland, his baseline of talent is fine. I don't think it's like taking a guy like Hunter Green and putting him on the Rockies and saying, okay, when are you going to start Hunter Green? Right. It's taking a pretty average MLB starter and putting him in one of the worst offensive environments and saying, what are you going to do? And I choose to avoid.
If Kyle Freeland was a Tiger, he could probably get through an entire season with like a 3.8 ERA, about a strikeout per inning almost. But it's just it's not nowhere near worth the risk. And you said that right there, Cow Chad, like getting ready for that annual blow up. Like it's going to happen. I don't want to be close enough to playing with that grenade to possibly have it explode on me. I just don't. It's not. Nothing is worth the risk right now, Kyle Freeland. Nothing.
Yeah. Speaking of worth the risk, some people saw, hey, we got a 2-start week from Chris Paddock, and he's going up against the White Sox in the first start. I got to take this. Well, 3-run homer to Andrew Vaughn in the first inning here for Chris Paddock. It looks like we had, if we do the full play-by-play, it looks like we had a Miguel Vargas line drive single to center. Guys, Miguel Vargas, man, I'm telling you, third base outfield eligible in almost every format. He's going to hit leadoff for the White Sox most games. He's going to be in the lineup every game. He was a former top prospect. Well, let's not say top, but he was a former top 100 prospect. Top 100. Yeah. Okay. Top 50. Good. He's not going to set the world on fire, right? You're not getting like oh my God, like you're not getting like a 2024 Colton Cowser season. I don't think, but I think you could get a solid season of a guy that is on your bench that you move to third base when you need to start or outfield. I played him in a couple of 12-team leagues over the first week because I needed somebody to cover, and it went fine. And so he had a Vargas walk. You had a Vargas single, a Luis Robert walk, an Andrew Benintendi ground out, and then an Andrew Vaughn homer. And Andrew Vaughn is another of those first basemen where I think he's kind of below the tier of 4 guys, but I think Andrew Vaughn is serviceable in deeper formats. Like he was coming around in the second half last year. He's going to play every day. It's solid. And I gotta ask you, James, let's say Paddock doesn't all of a sudden throw like 5 shutout innings and just striking out everybody. Let's say this becomes the uneven start we think it is. When do we see Zebby Matthews? Because it's got to be soon, right? I mean, they can't keep Paddock in this rotation.
I'm a bit more of a David Festa man myself, but in terms of one or both of those guys, I like them both a lot. I think they're both tremendous. They could have the potential to be legitimate major league pitchers. But it's the same thing with Paddock and we'll see Simeon was Richardson this week. I saw those guys picked up everywhere just for that matchup against the White Sox. And you're seeing the harm of that when you pick up a bad pitcher like Chris Paddock is at this point in his career, even against a bad team, because like someone can run into one. Like you said, this White Sox team, at least the top of that order, is probably a smidge underrated. I think this happens a lot in baseball fantasy where we're kind of sometimes a year behind, like something that was very good to do. Like last season, yes, you blindly started against the White Sox. The year before, you blindly started against the A's. Kind of got to let the season kind of get his feet wet a little bit before we know that's a guaranteed thing. And with Chris Paddock, I'm seeing the pitch tracker right now. When he hangs a slider right down the middle to Andrew Vaughn, it's going to go out. It's a major leagues professional hitter. And Chris Paddock's stuff at this point in his career is bad. Simeon was Richardson goes out there with nothing every single week, and he still continues to get the options. I think probably he's much safer just because he's much younger, but I don't know. But they're not going to cut Chris Paddock, are they? They're not going to DFA him. I think he's a tangible major league arm.
Does he do what the Tigers did for Kenta Maeda?
I guess, but I guess he'd even be better in relief because at least if he's in relief, he can gas up to 97, 98. But it's kind of sad what's happened to Chris Paddock over the last few years. Like, don't mean to chastise him, but he's definitely not as good as either Zebby or David Festa, who you never want to hold guys like that, but it seems like a month, May 15th, the worst case scenario, you get at least one of those two in the rotation. But that also makes it harder to hold them because you don't know which one's actually going to be. It could just be whoever lines up more in the 5-day schedule to where the spot is that winds up opening up.
So let me ask you, just your general philosophy. Like, are you stashing one of those guys now? Like, are you stashing Festa or Zebi, or is this too early to do that?
I think it's a full roster construction question. Like, how many bench spots do you have? How many pitchers do you have? Like, one league where I really did want to stash either Zebi or Festa. It was a 12-team league with not a very deep bench. I just got a rash of pitching injuries right off the bat, and I was like, I had Weathers, and then it was an early draft. I had Kirby, so I was like, I just can't. I don't have the room or the space right now to wind up stashing. And in that draft, I was like, I'm going to stash Christian Campbell because I missed a bunch of shortstop targets. That wound up working out really well. So I'm like, I got my stash. Good luck. I'm not going to do it anymore. The deeper, any kind of deeper league where you know you have a bench spot where weekly you're not using it, you don't need a streamer, like your lineup is fine. I think it's very much worth it. But if this team, like I said, it's a little bit riskier because you don't know which one gets called up. If you're stashing Zebi and Festa gets called up or vice versa, you're like, I just wasted a month of a roster spot now. And this guy, I don't even know if he's significantly closer to being called up than he was when I started with him. So it's so league specific and so league dependent. It's such a cop out, easy answer to give, but it's very hard to walk.
That's the right, but it's also the right answer to give. Yeah, I get that. Let's talk about another young player. The question from Jetta is Jackson Holliday worth rostering in a 12-team points league? Do you play in many points leagues, James?
I do play in a lot of points leagues. I like points leagues because I feel like it's a little bit more, you gotta get a little more creative with stuff. Like, there's only one way to get a stolen base in the categories league. Where it's a point league, it's like, I think the best players most often rise to the top. That's why I like them.
Okay. So tell people just in general how a points league differs, and then are you rostering Jackson Holliday in a points league?
Points league differs and also depends on, of course, what website you play on, because every website has a different base standard points leagues where just the things a player does amidst points value is much more similar to fantasy football in that sense, where oftentimes the double is worth 2 and the homer's worth 4 and the RBIs and runs are each worth 1. Yahoo does a points league format, their standard points league format, that's much more closely aligned with a rotisserie format. It's not all the way, but the way they weight their extra base hits versus their stolen bases, there's added value to the speedsters, like you'll see on most of the rankings that go out there from us on NBC and any other forum out there, because that's usually the leagues that most people are playing in. But the difference with a points league, especially for a guy like Jackson Holliday, is that maybe not even a guy like Jackson Holliday. I think it rewards on base ability much more so. And someone like Holliday, I believe, has had that, and will have that in his major league career. I think points leagues will also dramatically skew towards power. And I think that's something that Jackson Holliday, especially relative to his cohort at the second base position, will be able to have more so than anybody else. I'm still holding him. It was the exact kind of opening day weekend that Jackson Holliday kind of exhibited last year, where you could see moments of the gaudy tools, but then you see him swing through a couple fastballs in the zone, and you get a little scared about what could happen. But when a guy like him smacks a 430-foot home run to the opposite field, I'm just like, oh my God, they should please find a way to do this more often, because it's so good. And second base is such a barren wasteland after a certain period of time that he is still worth a hold. You can't draft a guy like Jackson Holliday and quit after a weekend. You have to draft a guy like Jackson Holliday. You have to give him 3 weeks, 4 weeks, the full month of April. And then you can kind of make your decision, figure it out. But you can't be, if you took a risk on a guy in the draft because you went through a whole winter and you liked what you saw from him and you liked the tools and you liked the potential, you can't quit after 4 days. Like, if you have Jackson Holliday, you're holding for a few more weeks, unless he starts to not play, but he's still playing every day. So you keep riding with that.
When he's in the lineup, he's in your lineup. Jay His House asked about Heston Kjerstad. I will just remind you, we talked about it at the beginning of the stream. When the stream ends and you can go back and watch from the beginning, or if you are watching right now and can go back and watch from the beginning, I would encourage you to do that. James and I basically just said, we're happy to take gambles on Heston Kjerstad, but we're just not convinced right now that he is in a full-time role. And also we wouldn't be dropping a player that we actually like for Heston Kjerstad because it's unclear how big of a role he's going to have and just how good he really is, because it hasn't really translated to the major leagues yet, etc. Speaking of young players, Perry asks, when will Jackson Chourio improve? Any day now. I mean, like any day now. I again, it's the first weekend. I just wouldn't really overreact. Like, we've seen Jackson Chourio be a good MLB player. Also, like, it sometimes takes guys a little while to get going at the beginning of the year. We don't really know. We don't have enough of a track record for Jackson Chourio to say confidently whether he's a guy who hits the ground running or just needs to, a few weeks to shake the rust or whatever. But you're holding him. Don't panic trade him. Don't bench him. Don't whatever, because you're going to bench him and he's going to go like 4 for 5 with 2 homers and 5 RBI in a game or something. Like, just keep him in your lineup.
I feel like, Perry, you might be watching the Jackson Chourio at bat against Chris Bubic that just happened, where he swung through two 93-mile-an-hour fastballs right down the middle. So I get being frustrated watching that, because Chris Bubic just got 5 fastball whiffs in the first inning, struck out the side of Jackson Chourio, Christian Yelich, and William
Yeah.
Contreras. It seems like this Brewers team got smacked in the mouth a little bit by the Yankees over the weekend, and this is also probably a team that you never think it carries over into the next season, but they watched their season end at home on a 9th-inning home run with 2 outs by Pete Alonso against their star closer, who also got traded in the offseason. I'm sure doesn't feel very good for a team that's contending like this. The Brewers, I don't know. This team I was very confident in. I'm sure there's no issue about what's going to happen the rest of the year. If these 4 games happen in the middle of May, no one's thinking about them, but they do seem shell-shocked right now as a team. So they might all get hot at the same time. So it might just be a little bit of a Brewers hangover thing happening with Chourio, Yelich, and Contreras, because all of them have started the season on the schneid.
Yes. We saw the same thing with the Red Sox. Like, the top of the Red Sox lineup has been terrible. Casas, Devers, Bregman, like they're not hitting. It happens with teams. Sometimes it's
Bottom's
all together.
good, though.
Yes, Bottom's been great.
Really good.
Bottom's been great. Adam asked a question, which will segue into another question we got. This is just a general like relief pitcher strategy. In a 15-team fab league, are you better served speccing on ambiguous, volatile closer situation, or saving the money until a more expensive but clearer opportunity arises? Here's what I would say. My personal take. I would rather spend the money now on an ambiguous situation, backing a closer, a pitcher that I believe in, rather than waiting for said pitcher to get the closer role and have to spend 5 times as much money, if not more, to get that closer.
Yeah.
However, I am not a fan of speccing on a volatile closer situation with a pitcher that I don't necessarily believe in, but he has the spot. And so this weekend is a perfect example. And I don't know where you stand on this, James. I put in bids for relief pitchers in some leagues where like I drafted a guy like Griffin Jacks or Jason Adam, where like I don't really need a guy. I like those guys. But if I could get a guy who would be a closer that I trust, I'd rather take that. So I put in like, some modest bids. But I had higher fab bids in for Blake Trinan and Justin Slayton than I did for Luke Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know Luke Jackson is the closer for Texas right now, but I don't believe in the profile. And I know Justin Slayton and Blake Trinan are getting saves, even though they're not the closer. They're going to get saves on good teams, and I trust them way more as relievers. And I think that they are far less likely to hurt my team. And so I would rather spend less money on a guy like that. And what happens if Tanner Scott's command leaves him again? It's happened in like every single one of his MLB seasons. And all of a sudden, Blake Trinan is getting 70% of the saves for the Dodgers. What happens if Justin Slayton is really good? And so Alex Cora goes, you know what? I'm just going to keep using Aroldis Chapman in the 7th and 8th against the best lefties that come up, and I'll let Slayton save games. And Slayton is in a 50-50 situation, a 60-40 situation. Like, I'd rather get those guys now than pay for it when something happens when they do. And I don't need to spend all that money on Luke Jackson, who I think might lose the job in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's all about the specking with upside. Like, I think we can watch Luke Jackson, having taken in most of his career, watch him this weekend against the Red Sox give up that home run to Wilyer Abreu. And you can openly say, no offense to Luke Jackson, he's not a very good relief pitcher. He's kind of in there right now as like a victim of the circumstance, because that bullpen itself is not very good. There's no one's really risen to the top there. Where a guy like Chris Martin just still looks like the most effective reliever, but he's someone that's never, ever in his entire major league career, despite being one of the most trustworthy relievers going on a full decade, ever got a 9th inning role, ever. Maybe that's a him thing. Maybe that's his team thing. But someone with 20% strikeout minus walk rate going on 7 consecutive seasons in Major League Baseball will not save games. And it seems like that's not going to happen again. But even just looking at the fantasy player rater for 5x5 leagues on Fangraphs from relief pitchers last year, like it's always funny to look back at this at the end of the season, because reliever value is so skewed and so strange and so week by week. But when you look at a full season player rater chart, that Griffin Jacks was the 10th most valuable reliever last year with his 10 saves and 5 wins because of all the strikeouts and the ratios. Like it's something that I think, I don't know if I would call it like a money ball in like fantasy baseball sense, but something I think is forgotten about, that if you could just leave a guy like that in your lineup, you will have to prospect saves elsewhere. You will have to figure that out, but getting your saves and then moving on. I'm kind of counter arguing my point where now, because if you get 4 saves from Luke Jackson in the next 2 weeks, it's almost worth it, whatever you had to spend on him. As long as it was like less than 15% of your budget, 5 saves in 3 weeks, it's worth it to a certain degree.
Unless that also comes with like a 7 ERA and a whatever. But yeah, I get it. If you think you're going to get saves, like I would, yeah. If you think you're going to get saves and not pay a lot, I think that's the thing. If you're not going to have to pay a lot, Luke Jackson, you're going to have to pay a lot. A guy like, for example, South Halverson, who looks to be the closer for the Rockies. Like, for example, in this 12-team OC, Halverson went for $13. Luke Jackson went for $102. So I'm not going to spend 10% of my budget on Luke Jackson right now. If I'm spending $13 on Halverson and I get 4 saves and then he eventually loses that job and does Rockies things, I'm not really worried about it. Spending $102, spending 10% of your budget right now, you better get more than a week's worth of production. And I'd rather take a gamble on, like, you know, Blake Trinan went for $45. I'd rather have Blake Trinan for half the cost of Luke Jackson. And that kind of leads to Bill's question, which was, is Chris Martin worth holding, or is Jose Alvarado a better stash? Now, I'm okay having both of those guys on your roster, because we just talked about, like, if we don't think Luke Jackson is a really good closer, somebody else is going to have to get saves. And I think Chris Martin is the next guy up, even if it's by default. However, I'd probably rather have Jose Alvarado, because Jose Alvarado is likely already going to get saves when really strong left-handed hitters are coming up in the 9th inning. Jordan Romano is coming off a shoulder injury that hampered him last year, and he didn't look great in his first outing. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is a situation where there's like a little bit, not like a full committee, but like a little bit of a split. Mm-hmm. And also Alvarado was lights out this spring. Incredible. And we have seen him be a really dominant reliever, and he was unreal this spring. So I have a lot of shares of Alvarado right now in that same, like, Griffin Jax role, where, like, he's on a good team. What if he ends the season with 5 wins and 10 saves and a really good ERA and strikeouts? Like that's a valuable player for you. So I would rather have Jose Alvarado, but I would still probably rather have Justin Slayton and Blake Trinan than Alvarado.
Yeah, I agree on that. It's just, to me, I look back at this and it's so weird. I did a big sleeper closer article for a few weeks, like about a month ago now, in the middle when draft season was really getting going, about going through this Rangers bullpen, like who's going to get these saves. I didn't even mention Luke Jackson. I think I mentioned 5 other relievers on that roster. I didn't even mention him because I'm shocked that's even happening. But Chris Martin has 15 saves in his major league career. He's never had more than 4 saves in the season. That was in 2019. For some reason, despite him being literally good every single year that he pitches, still maintaining 95-mile-an-hour velocity, still having good secondary stuff, amazing command, he's never been a 9th inning guy. And again, some you have to think some point, like, that's a thing about him. Maybe he's like, I don't want the 9th inning. He's like, I can't do the 9th inning, because why would no one ever give him the shot? He's been in bullpens that had opportunities. It just never happens.
And we've had Daniel Hudson said that before, like he'd rather not close. There are some guys that would rather not close. Maybe it is Chris Martin. I don't know. We got another points league question for you from Dylan. He says, in a points league where starting pitcher, relief pitchers are valuable, that's guys with dual eligibility, and saves are not essential. How comfortable would you be rostering both Osvaldo Bido and Michael Soroka every week rather than pivoting to like a Justin Slayton, Jose Alvarado, Alexis Diaz? I'm taking out of that conversation. If saves are not essential, you should not be rostering Alexis Diaz, Griffin Jax, Cade Smith. So these like elite late inning, high leverage, not closers versus these kind of borderline starters like Osvaldo Bido and Soroka. But Bido and Soroka are both SP/RP eligible.
Oh, yeah, this is my wheelhouse. This seems like a classic ESPN points league question here. But you have to do everything you can, or CBS maybe. You have to do everything you can to get those guys on your team. Maybe not Soroka, because I think he's still much more unsettled skill-wise, possibly even role-wise, because we still know that DJ Hurts is in the minor leagues and could be a better major league starter.
Remember, DJ Hurts has the injury now, the UCL injury.
He had the injury. Yeah, I forgot he had that. But still, I'm pretty confident what Osvaldo Bido can do in a start-by-start basis. Like, I know he's probably not going to destroy me. I think he might. It's going to be a little uneven at times, but the stuff is good enough. Like in a situation like this too, someone like Jack Leither, he he might become one of the most valuable players in this entire league because he has that relief pitcher eligibility. He looked fantastic on Friday in a short outing, but still against a very good Red Sox lineup with all the new pitches, doing what he wanted them to do, using them in all different counts against all different hitters. Those guys are valuable. Even a guy like Andre Palante, someone who gets a million ground balls, a great home ballpark. You should be pushing every single one of those starter reliever guys over the average reliever that you'd probably be looking to your lineup anyway. Someone else who's even interesting for no reason, Connor Gillespie. He had legitimately a nice slider and a good fastball in his first career start. I don't know if that's anything that can hold against any kind of good team, but if your league is deep and you need a random relief pitcher streamer and Connor Gillespie has a home start that's not against the Mets or the Braves or the Phillies, that's also probably something that's worth it. Just in those leagues where saves are not essential, I would be hammering these relief pitcher eligible starters because they kind of are like a little bit of a lightning rod, a little bit of a difference maker for your roster.
It's good strategy in all leagues, knowing what your league is and knowing how to kind of get the loopholes per se. I got to tell you, James, I just looked up at the Red Sox game, and I saw that it was the top of the first, and there was one out, and the Red Sox had two base runners. And I said, did Rafael Devers get a hit? Oh my God, did he get a hit? He did not. He did walk though, so he got on base, but he did not get a hit. Alex Bregman did get a hit. And then Robbie Refsnyder has struck out, and so it's first and second with two outs. Michael Garcia has homered for the Royals. This is another good example of like not overreacting to one lineup. Michael Garcia didn't make the opening day lineup for the Royals, and everybody was like, oh my God, is he not starting? And it's just like, no, well, Vinny Pasquantino can only DH, and so they're moving some things around. And they had Kevin Biggio at first base, and they had Jonathan India at third. Michael Garcia is playing center field this game, which is super interesting because it's showing us that they might move him at second, at third, and center. And so Garcia could still get some everyday playing time. It's his second homer of the year. He's hitting 455 in the very small sample size. Like, just don't panic with the one lineups, right? We don't want to freak out too much. And we did not get that turnaround from Chris Paddock. It is 8-0 Chicago White Sox in the bottom of the second inning. Chris Paddock allowed 8 runs on 5 hits, 3 walks. He is still pitching, ladies and gentlemen. They are just feeding him to the wolves, and just you made their bed. You're going to lay in it. Benintendi homered. It was a 3-run homer for Benintendi. I did scoop Benintendi up in some deeper leagues because they had a good week of all right-handed pitching, and it looked like it was going to be a lot of good matchups. Benintendi hit a 3-run homer. What else happened here? We had.
I'm happy for the White Sox. I like that they're playing well. I think that last season was as miserable of a baseball experience as any kind of fan or player could possibly have. Again, maybe until the Marlins maybe try to do it again this season, but it's nice. It's also when you see these blow-ups by a guy like Chris Paddock on a Monday afternoon, and you know that you didn't have him, roster him, start him anywhere. It's such a nice little fist pump feeling knowing that the rest of your league mates are losing points on that when you avoid the landmine. Can I ask you a Red Sox question?
Of course.
What do you think about Wilyer Abreu starting the season? Would you think that he has a secure spot? Do you trust the talent? Do you trust the ability? How are you valuing Abreu right now?
So my hesitation on Wilyer Abreu was never about his talent. It was more about his long-term role in Boston. Abreu plays a good right field. He's just 26 years old. This is a guy who hit 253 with 15 homers and 8 steals as a rookie last year. So there should be an expectation that wasn't his peak, right? That he could be a 260 hitter, 15 to 20 homers, 10 to 15 steals, pretty solid, regular, who is never going to play against lefties. Like, he's just never going to play against lefties. The issue is you have Roman Anthony clobbering home runs in AAA. You have Masataka Yoshida, who now cannot DH because Devers is DHing. And Yoshida, despite not having like a lot of power, is like a 270, 280 MLB hitter since he's come over. He is a usable hitter. Definitely. You've got Ceddanne Rafaela, who was a former top 40 overall prospect in his own right, who is an elite defensive center fielder. You've got Jarren Duran, who's coming off a really strong season. There just doesn't seem to be room for everybody. And to me, Abreu seemed like the easy option to trade away. He's a guy with some swing and miss in his game. He will run through hot stretches and cold stretches. And so you put Duran in left, Rafaela in center, Roman Anthony in right field. That seems like how you could go forward with this with the Red Sox moving forward. Christian Campbell can play second. He can play left. He can move all around. I still kind of think that might be how this goes. Roman Anthony can only have multi-homer games in AAA for so long before the Red Sox are just like, we got to call this dude up, and they might have to make room for him. But Abreu, if he were to get traded, he's going to start wherever he gets traded. He might even start for a team that is willing to let him figure it out against lefties. We don't know. So I'm totally fine rostering Wilyer Abreu. I would just be more happy to do it in daily moves leagues where I could say, or in even formats like NFBC, where I can look at the schedule of like Monday to Thursday, Friday to Sunday, and say, okay, I'm going to sit him Friday to Sunday because they face two lefties versus two righties or whatever. But I think he's a talented player, and I think he got a little bit also written off because the weight loss in the spring with the gastrointestinal thing where he didn't play for like a very, very long time. That is going to do it for us today. Over 50 minutes here. We're going to be here every Monday answering all of your questions, getting you ready for the week. Hopefully, we will also be able to help you set some lineups in weeks coming. Obviously, there were a lot of like 2-10 starts today, so some of your leagues had lineup locks. But come here on Mondays, ask us your lineup questions. Should you start this guy or that guy? Is this person in a 2-start week worth it? If it's Chris Paddock, it is not. Things like that will help you through it. I am on Twitter at Samuski NYC. James is at James_Schiano. James's waiver wire column is coming out on Tuesday over at NBC Sports, so make sure you check that out. I'll have my starting pitcher breakdown column coming out on Wednesday, and then my waiver column comes out Sunday afternoons. And then always keep it locked to the Rotoworld Player News. This is the Rotoworld Player News Q&A. And so obviously we are just loading up as much information as humanly possible all day, all week on the Player News page. And I'll just end with this question from Dylan, just because he asked about starting lineups. Would you go with Jose Ramirez this week or pivot? I would go with Jose Ramirez. Vote called him day to day. He called him day to day when he first got hurt, and then he said it would be potential for him to pinch hit. It would be potential for him to be in the lineup. The Guardians do play today at 9:40, so maybe if you have somebody in the 9:40-ish or 10 o'clock games who you could like move Ramirez to a utility. And maybe you could slide somebody in if he's not in the starting lineup today. But I think this is a situation where Ramirez could start today. And if he doesn't start today, he could be back in the lineup the next day. I don't think this is a really long absence. So I would lean towards keeping Jose Ramirez in my starting lineup.
Yeah, even if he misses a game, I'm taking 5 games of Jose Ramirez over 6 games. So basically anybody else in the entire league. It's worth the risk of getting in the lineup.
Agreed. Thanks, Dylan. And also you, Rock. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking questions. We will check everybody next week. Make sure you go to the Rotoworld Player News page, bookmark it, keep it up there all the time. Follow James and I on Twitter, and we will see you next week on the Rotoworld Player News